Hello, and welcome back to the Just Berry podcast. We're helping you develop a winning mindset and stay motivated to overcome adversity and create a better life. We have a powerful conversation lined up for you today. We're joined by Alex Hubelbank, an NBA private performance consultant and physical therapist. She has a history of working for two different NBA teams and has embraced a nonlinear career journey, spanning from working as a live-in nanny to business lead at Apple. Alex is also a nationally ranked powerlifter and self-identified nomad. So I met Alex at a recent open mat for jiu-jitsu. And for those of you who are new to the martial arts world, an open mat is where people from multiple gyms get together at one gym to roll or practice jiu-jitsu together. And when I met Alex, I was instantly drawn to the strength of her presence and her enthusiasm for life. So that's why I'm really excited to dive into our conversation and hear more about your journey, Alex. So thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me and thank you for the very kind words.
You're welcome. And before we dive into your story, I would love for you to share your personal philosophy on adversity with us. What role does it play in our lives? What role has it played in your life?
Just start with a really heavy question. Sure.
We're going to dive right in.
My personal philosophy on adversity, I think that's something that, I say all the time, actually, like a life without pain is a life not lived. And I think that adversity is sort of under that same category where you are never going to be able to predict what comes your way. But if you live your life without any adversity, at least in my mind, and certainly anyone that knows me knows that my life has been filled with a lot of adversity, probably brought on by taking a lot of risks and chasing things that I think are really important to me. I believe that we need it. So it drives us to make better decisions about where we go or reevaluate how we look at who we are within our own lives. So my philosophy, I guess, is trying to do a better job of actually embracing adversity. And I think actually I'm at the point now where I've lived in such a transitional period over the past 3 years that adversity feels normal or natural to me, that it's a piece of every experience I have. And I think also too that a lot of people look at adversity and think of it as a negative connotation, where really I would imagine if you look up the definition, it probably has a lot more to do with just unplanned components of a situation that maybe weren't necessarily what you expected or what you wanted, but adversarial just being the opposition. So being able to consider better that adversity is probably because I'm trying to do something that steps outside of what is comfortable for anyone and creates a little bit of friction.
Wow. I love that definition and the philosophy there, especially like you mentioned the risk and having that element of the unknown and that opposition. I never really thought about it like that, but that's so true.
Me either until this moment, but I think realistically, it's like my entire life. So I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, but my whole life right now is almost in like 6 to 8 week periods. I don't know necessarily where I'm living. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know what it looks like after that. And some of that is definitely chosen because I'm taking a lot of, I think, career and personal risks that are worthy of what kind of drives me professionally and personally. Even the context around us meeting at a jiu-jitsu gym, which for people that don't know me, I'm 3 weeks new to that, but I am extremely uncomfortable, but I realize it's something that feels like the right thing for me to do right now. And I continue to want to show up for it.
Yeah, which is crazy because you definitely fooled me. I sat down next to you. I was like, dang, this girl's badass. And you still are, even though you just started. But I was like, man, she's probably been doing this for like 6 years or something.
Oh man, I wish.
You mentioned your life circumstances right now and how they're mostly chosen by you, and that made me think of my favorite verse from the Bible. It's Matthew 22:14 about how many are called, but few are chosen. There's a footnote in there about chosen, and one take on that is that you've volunteered for it. So you're willing. So, God chooses those who are willing to put in the work and the effort and to face that opposition. So I just really admire you and respect you for doing that in your life.
It's interesting that you first, thank you. But I appreciate you saying that too, because I often feel, especially from the time I was a kid, I never felt like I chose my career. Obviously, kids don't choose careers, but I knew what I wanted to do with my life in some way when I was 11 years old. And at no point, despite the fact that as I alluded to earlier, I've had a nonlinear career path. I don't ever feel like I've necessarily chosen any of those steps. I feel like I was just supposed to do them. Where now I've recognized a little bit more that yes, they are choices, but I'm trying to align what are the things that make me feel the most satisfied in my personal and professional life, and also to some extent, where do I feel the most needed? So, what you were talking about around, yes, my life circumstances are chosen. They are chosen because, or that this like lack of stability is chosen is also because I want to support people in areas of their life where I feel like I can be the most helpful to them. And that comes with a lot of change at various points, because when I kind of fall out of the point of being the most helpful from a physical therapy, strength coaching perspective, then I want to be able to move on to the next thing, not because I'm trying to jump ship, but because they don't necessarily need me right now. And then I'll come back to them when they need me again, but it allows me a little bit of freedom. And obviously it's interesting, but yeah, the what you were just talking about made me kind of think that's probably the right now my North Star.
I love that. I love how you have chosen to, yeah, just place yourself in that situation, even though there's that instability and you don't know what's next, but you recognize where you have value and your strengths and different circumstances where those align with other people's needs. And the more that you're willing to face that instability and uncertainty, the more it puts you in those situations where you can actually help the people you were meant to help in the first place. And speaking about that, you mentioned your job. So you've had experience working as a physical therapist in the team setting, with the NBA, and also in the private settings. Can you share a little bit about your experience with that?
Sure. So I have both worked in the team setting in the NBA, team setting in professional rugby before that. I now work privately specifically for NBA players, but I've worked with a couple of different sport players as well. But my primary is definitely in the NBA, and it certainly was not necessarily chosen. One job ended because it wasn't the right fit, and I ended up picking up with another opportunity. And I think there's some element again to there's certainly risk involved, and there is certainly a lot of unknown because this is not super common the way that I am involved in with working for players. And like I said, I mean, I'm willing to allow things to end when I think that they no longer serve either party, which is probably another element of why what I do is so unique. I don't think that I'll do it this way forever, but at least for right now, it fulfills the aspects of my life where I look at, okay, where am I comfortable living? For how long am I comfortable living there? Is that a place that I would like to visit? Is that a place that I can feel comfortable with the financial price point that I'm being paid at? And does the work stimulate me? Is it a project that feels enticing? And also, what does my life look like if I stay there? For example, me being in Phoenix right now, I have fallen in love with jujitsu, and it's going to be really hard for me to leave and find another gym.
Good news is that there are many gyms. Usually wherever you go, there's one.
Built-in community.
Right? Um, what it sounds like you've developed a lot of self-awareness, not only just as an individual, but also just your life circumstances in general. How did you develop that self-awareness, and what advice would you give to other people who are working on their self-awareness?
That is a great question. I think one big one would probably be seeking feedback and or being open to feedback even if you don't agree with it. There's, people will say there's truth in every joke. There's also probably truth in most perspective. So oftentimes I feel like I think very critically about how people view me or how I view myself. That's probably a pretty big driving force, is I spend a lot of time thinking about that. I say, okay, well, how do I want to represent myself? What do I want people to say about me? What do I want people to know about me? And I was having this conversation actually recently where I think I was describing someone as nice. I thought about it and I was like, do people describe me as nice? Probably not. Do they describe me as authentic? Absolutely. Do they describe me as a good person? Probably. And those are things that I will consider often. And the question I'll ask myself often, the question of what would other people that know you say about you? And I try and answer that question without actually asking other people. But I also look at how people behave toward me, around me, and maybe this is pathological in nature, but I'm constantly thinking about, okay, well, if I didn't get that opportunity, is there feedback in it? Is that something that I can seek out? Because I was taught very early in my career and really in my life, I guess, that if someone gives you feedback, it's because they care about your progress as a human being, because those types of conversations, especially when it's constructive, are extremely uncomfortable. And so I was taught how to do it or how to receive it, but just having that in the back of my mind, it made me, I think, recognize how much more control I have over who I want to be in the world, especially when I'm willing and open to that. Because if someone or if someone has a problem with something like that, that means that maybe they have an issue with their own belief in themselves, or
Right.
something where it's like, okay, well, I'm asking for feedback because I'm trying to get better. Anyone that's upset about that, what are we trying to do? I don't know if I
Yeah.
want to work with people like that. I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of got,
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah, for sure. I like having that intentional thinking and just having that humility as well, being open to that feedback and intentionally putting yourself in that situation where you can say, okay, like I know I have blind spots. What can I work on? And I think it's important to make sure like whoever is giving you that feedback or whoever you're asking for that feedback, like they need to have results that speak for themselves.
right.
Just go ask some random person like what they think about me and then be like, oh yeah, like,
And even as you just said that, I was thinking about, because you asked me, where did I get this self-awareness from? I believe I was probably raised that way, but the reason I was raised that way was that my dad basically made me believe from a very young age that I could do anything I wanted, or that I could have anything that I wanted. But the caveat to that is, one, you have to be willing to take a lot of risk and to be unsuccessful at a lot of things. But two, that you have to be willing to work for it. So I recently sat down and looked at a lot of goals that I had set for myself professionally, personally, as an athlete, as a person in the workforce. And I have achieved every single goal I've ever set out for myself, whether that be in powerlifting, whether that be in sports, whether that be going to school, the school I wanted to go to, becoming a physical therapist, working in the NBA. And that has a lot less to do with how great of a person I am, and a lot more to do with how much conviction I had to achieve those goals and how important those goals were to me. So, in recognizing the origin story of my self awareness, I think it has a lot to do with setting really lofty goals and finding ways to achieve them. If you don't have some level of humility or self awareness, there will always be obstacles in the way that you can't get around. And I'm unwilling to let there be obstacles in my way. And a lot of that was driven by a belief system from my family, particularly my dad, around you can do anything you want. My parents chose the name Alexandra when I was born purely so I could shorten it to Alex on a job application and not specify that I was a female, which is a crazy thing. That was the only reason they chose my name, but that is so much who I am.
Wow.
It's hard for me to know, like, was that nature or nurture? I don't
Yeah.
know, combination of both, but yeah, it's been a driving force for me.
Wow. First of all, congratulations. Just everything that you've accomplished. I feel like it's so easy to, I don't know if you've experienced this in your life, but for me, sometimes it's hard to look back at everything that I've accomplished that I set out to do and like actually celebrate that and take ownership for the good. So I
Well,
just want to shine the spotlight on you and just
thank you.
give you that credit because it's not easy, especially when you set lofty goals and you accomplish them. Like that takes a lot.
And I think, for people like you and I who are just in the midst of goals all the time and
Mhm.
trying to do things, and just in the short time that I've known you and some of the stuff you've told me, you've made some pretty big moves in your own life, and you don't even realize how far you've come because you're still just going. So
Yeah.
it was a helpful exercise for me to sort of reinvigorate my passion and my conviction and my drive within myself of knowing, okay, I can do anything I want.
Yep. If anyone's struggling with their motivation or the direction that they're going in life, or they're feeling a little bit down or discouraged, then I would definitely encourage you to do what Alex just shared. Like write down a list of everything that you've accomplished, your big and small victories, and just take some time to really reflect on that and give yourself that credit and be proud of yourself. Because at the end of the day, if you don't celebrate that, if you don't have that self pride, then it's like, what do you have? You can't neglect yourself. in that celebration process. We talked about how you are in your early 30s and you're single, and most of your friends are married and having kids. When we were at the gym, we were discussing this, and I'm also single and in my late 20s, and I'm kind of in the same boat there. But I think there's a lot of women who struggle with their purpose or even their sense of self-worth after they maybe envision a certain way that their life would be in their 20s or 30s or 40s or whenever. And then they look around and things are completely different from what they thought it would be. What advice would you give to those listeners?
Yeah, that's a hard question to
Yeah.
answer. I think that I have probably embraced it a little bit differently in that I try not to compare myself, and that's definitely easier said than done. I try not to compare myself to what's going on around me, but I think there's a phrase that I've been thinking about a lot recently. It's doing the most right thing right now. Realistically, my priorities and goals have a lot more to do with enjoying the travel that I get to do, enjoying the life that I've created for myself within this space, working in a way that I really enjoy, but also slowing down enough to say it is okay to not just be driving after this one goal. So it's been a new development for me.
Mm.
Hence why I joined jujitsu was I love training for something, and I sort of put my powerlifting career a little bit on pause, or at least on the shelf, just because of my lifestyle. There were other things that were a little bit more important to me after I achieved a certain goal. And it
Mm.
allowed me to kind of say, okay, let me put that on the back burner and prioritize this thing over here. And especially in the space that I work in, let's say medical and performance space, there's this constant drive, especially at the professional level, to just throw yourself into work and have no other real priorities. Even though we all talk about, yes, having work-life balance, that's really hard to achieve. And I just had this conversation earlier this afternoon with someone who's sort of trying to break into a similar space as me. And we discussed how every 6 months I sit down and I write what are the 5 most important things in my life right now. Not things as in items, things as in what do I want for my life right now? And sometimes it's a mix of personal, professional. Sometimes it is purely personal, and sometimes it's purely professional, but it's 5 of them. And every 6 months, it's in the same notebook. And I always look at what I had previously written, and they've been really similar. And
Mm.
so, to answer your question around, dealing with some of that stuff. So every time I write down that 5, sometimes having a partner is on there, but the other 4 are all professional or personal. And so those are competing demands. And it makes me think about the other aspect where it's like you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything. And you certainly can't have it all at the same time. A harsh reality of adulthood, but I'm starting to embrace that even more. And again, self-reflecting on, well, am I in a position where having a partner is realistic for me? Absolutely not, because I'm nowhere and everywhere at the same time. So that's not realistic. Do I want that more than I want to travel? Not yet, I don't think. So the biological pressure of if I desire to have kids, I probably need to think about this. And so I'm thinking about it, but I'm not letting it deter me from other things. And also, I have a bunch of friends who have babies that I get to enjoy, and I don't feel that I'm missing anything by not being on that same timeline, because I love what I do, and I don't inherently find pressure in having to do this on a particular timeline, or if it's all lost for me. Especially, again, going back to how much I travel has opened my mind to seeing how the world works and being exposed to so much outside of my comfort zone and outside of my own home community, that I've created my home community wherever I am, and I see the potential of lives that I could live in each of these places. And that actually gives me more solace of knowing or getting closer to what are the things that I do want in my life.
You mentioned that sense of home being with you wherever you go. And I think that's such an important thing to take with us, regardless of if we're moving around physically or not. Like, because there's always change in our life. We're always constantly facing that change in relationships or friends or jobs, or maybe physically, like you. How do you maintain that sense of home or being grounded amidst all the change and inconsistency in your life right now?
Extremely difficult to do. One, I make my bed every day. And
Mm.
that's not a militant thing. I can tell you the exact day I started making my bed. It was in 2012. I felt out of control in my life. And for some reason, I just felt like when I got out of my bed, I wanted to make my bed. And I've made it every single day since, including in
Wow.
hotels, which is extremely weird.
Yeah.
Two, I have made a conscious effort to invest in the friendships that I already have. I, uh, the phrase no new friends. I have many new friends, but what I try and do, and this is something that when I was younger, I did a terrible job at. I almost felt like I was a snowball rolling down a hill collecting human beings. And
I feel that.
like whoever was rolling next to me for that moment was the person that I was investing the most into. And that I
Mhm.
think I pissed off a lot of my friends because I didn't prioritize them in ways where I showed them where I valued them, because I was placing new friends potentially on the same level as friends I had had for a long time by nature of just proximity, geography, lifestyle, jobs, etc. And now, especially as I've gotten older, and interestingly, with how many people I interact with in a day, sometimes it's very lonely. I have tried to make a really conscious effort. And I think I've done a decent job at this of investing in friendships that are going to continue to be important to me, and keeping that circle a lot smaller and protecting that circle and showing the people who do matter to me within what I would consider my inner close circle, showing them how I feel and how important they are to me by reaching out to them and not waiting. And I realize, especially because of my life, and I'm sure what you could see on social media is like I am all over the place and I'm busy, quote unquote, which I am, but that doesn't mean I don't have time for people. And that's on me to control that. So that's definitely very grounding. I also have things that, again, not in a militant way. It's like I know 4 things I'm going to do every day. I'm going to drink coffee. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'm going to wash my face, and I'm probably going to go to the gym or do some form of exercise. So all 4 of those things every single day, that's extremely grounding for me, because no matter where I wake up, those are happening.
Right. Those are things you can do no matter where you're at. And they're simple. And I love that, because it's if we can't master the basics, we can't do those simple things, then how do we expect to have victory or success in the big things?
For
So
sure.
that's a really good practice. You mentioned a little bit about growing up and the importance of your father, his influence in your life. What are some other key events or even people in your life growing up that help shape who you are today?
I have a lot. I am fortunate in that while my parents are not together and haven't been together in 23 years, I have 2 amazingly supportive, engaged, go-getting, passionate, interesting parents that support my brother and I, and have for our entire lives, and do whatever you want, but also figure out, they're like both practical and passionate.
Mm.
Interestingly, neither of them had particularly passionate jobs, in that they didn't necessarily choose their careers. They both sort of fell into them by way of getting a degree that, again, wasn't particularly glamorous, or they didn't have this whole plan. And they both had careers in, they both got degrees in accounting,
Mm.
but ended up having very lucrative careers. Even now, so like my mom works at anthropology in retirement because it's fun, and then she's randomly like taking classes at the community college, and
Wow.
she's 67 years old. And then my brother makes music, and he is all self-taught. He is pursuing that, but also finding a way to make money to support that. And then I also have a 91-year-old great aunt who started a company in the 50s as a woman, and has been an absolute savage, who unmarried, no kids, but she has been like the matriarch of our family. And she is such an amazing role model that I wouldn't have even ever thought, like, oh, it's not anything that she's ever said. It's
Mm.
all of the ways that she has carried herself within our family. I have a giant family. So having a woman like that in my family, plus my mom, plus my dad, and the inspiration around just, you can have whatever you want, you can work for whatever you want, and you can change your mind
Mm.
whenever you want, has been the biggest driver, I think.
Yeah, having those examples that they almost like give you permission for you to open your mind up, and it can be really difficult when people don't experience that growing up. But
Maybe, oh, I'm sorry. No.
I was gonna say, like, in the end, like, no matter who you grow up with or around, like, you are the one who makes the choice in the end, whether or not you're gonna give yourself that permission to dream big or think big.
Definitely. And I feel like probably one of the most powerful parts of my upbringing was that my parents never told me what to do with my career or what not to do. And so it allowed me to be a little bit more exploratory. And I did end up at some point in a corporate career for a period of time, almost as a hat tip to both of them, that I would see if it was something that interested me, despite the fact that I had always felt like I was going to be in the medical and performance field. And they never told me I shouldn't do it. They never questioned the return on investment financially. Generally, they were just like, hey, as long as you have a job and you're happy, go for it. And then I found my way that direction without them telling me to do it. And it gave me better perspective, but also an even deeper relationship with my parents because I could understand where they came from.
Wow, what great example. I'm happy for you that you were able to have that in your life. What would you say is the biggest thing that's helped you develop your mindset, specifically to get to that level of being a nationally ranked powerlifter?
I was always an athlete growing up, and I took my athletics very seriously. Probably some would say too seriously. But again, belief in yourself, which was instilled in me. But the other piece specifically for powerlifting is that powerlifting is very objective. It's very objective, right? You either did the lift or you didn't do the lift, compared to something kind of like jujitsu, just from a point system standpoint, where there's a little more subjectivity. Other sports, which are a little bit more subjective, let's say if you play in a soccer game and you don't score a goal or have an assist, it's hard to measure on paper whether you had a good game or not. You might have two different people who have varying opinions on that, similar to more team sports. So in powerlifting, and I recently was having this conversation too. I think my mental game was the best part of my career in powerlifting. And it's because, like I said, it's extremely objective, and nothing is different on match day or meet day than it is in the gym, other than the environment. The weights are the same. The lift is the same. It's all the context around it. Is it something you've never done before? Is it something, are there a lot more people there? The lights, etc. Is it in a different place? Goes back to our original conversation about adversity and opposition. For my most recent powerlifting meet, I trained in tons of different gyms. The equipment sometimes wasn't perfect. My training session wasn't perfect. I was dealing with adversity every single day, but it ties in, one, how I became comfortable in environments that I didn't know. Number two, it ties in grounding myself. And what I would do in powerlifting is become so ritualistic that oftentimes judges or the announcers would call this out too, that I literally did the exact same thing before I went up to the bar in every single lift at every single meet. And it the way I describe it is that I created space between everything that happened before and everything that would happen after. So it's like the context no longer mattered, because the only thing that I could think of in those moments are exactly what I'm doing, which is literally adjust the left wrist wrap, adjust the right wrist wrap, adjust my hair, take a breath. I'm thinking about these steps, and I have visualized me being successful in those things so many times that there wasn't any space to be nervous or to let doubt creep in, or to the environmental context to stress me out because I was, trying to pull 500 at a national meet. It was like, no, all you're doing is walking up to a bar, taking a breath, and doing the exact same thing you do hundreds of thousands of times.
Right. Yeah.
And you're going to be successful because you've done that hundreds of thousands of times. And you deserve to be successful because you trained for months and months and months to get to this point. You're not doing something that you don't own.
That's powerful, that self-belief and the repetitions, not only physically but mentally as well. Because when it comes down to it, success and everything starts in our mind.
And it's a crazy thing. I would have someone else load the bar for me so that I didn't know it was on the bar. And the difference between knowing and not knowing, it was so much easier, which is a crazy thing because it's just your brain. It's literally just knowing what's on the bar changed your ability to do it. Absolutely not.
It can be really difficult for anybody, but women especially, to walk into a new gym. What advice would you have for them? Someone who's interested and has been intimidated or scared to go in there and try something new.
I believe that every single time I make a fool out of myself, I am better for it. And the reality is, like, I can only be myself. And certainly one thing I've learned from martial arts gyms, at least the ones that I've gone to, it's now 4, extremely welcoming community, despite there being a high level of intimidation. But also, you don't get anywhere in life if you're not willing to be uncomfortable. And absolutely everyone else started as you at some point. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be without clumsiness or embarrassment, but those are emotions that make you feel alive.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to embrace them. It doesn't mean I feel any less silly, but it also
Mm-hmm.
allows me to be more of myself. And I think vulnerability begets vulnerability in that when you walk into places like that and you have experiences like that, other people do experience those things. If you allow that to be seen, garners positive human nature to want to help you. So,
Yeah. Everybody can relate. Everybody
yeah,
in where you are, and
we've all embarrassed ourselves.
yes,
Anyone
yes.
who says they haven't is lying.
I know that's part of the fun, honestly. Last question here. If your 10-year-old self, if 10-year-old Alex saw who you are today, how would she feel?
I think she would be pleasantly surprised in
Mm,
some ways. Pleasantly surprised around just how much of the things she had wanted to do have already kind of been done, but also how much reflection we trying to let things that happen bother me less, especially things that really could be traumatic or emotionally difficult or considered things that would be really big life events and not in a positive way. It's like, I'm still here. I made it. And I'm still doing things that I feel continually happier and happier with my life and who I am and where I'm going and how I represent myself. So I think it would be pleasant surprise, but also almost a little bit of relief
mm.
that it gets easier to deal with hard things as you go through hard things.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with our listeners today?
Just to find ways to be confident in yourself. Again, easier said than done. I think being reflective, and people will say all the time, like, oh, you should write in a journal, you should do that. I'm terrible at writing in a journal, but I do write things down. And I find that when I write things down, and especially when I write them all down in one or several notebooks by hand, that's a me thing, they are a little bit more impactful. And I find myself thinking about them more, and it's easier for me to go back and say, okay, do I still align with these values? Is this still who I am? Is this still who I want to be? And that alone gives me more confidence because it's matching the way that I represent myself out in the world with how I look at myself at home.
That's powerful. I would definitely back you up on that. I think writing things down is the only way to go. I
With
have like so many
particular
notes.
special pen and the
Yes,
whole
color coded, the whole thing. Yes. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Alex. If anybody is wanting to connect further with Alex, I'm going to post the Instagram link at the bottom of the episode. Alex, you are an amazing example of strength, of dedication, of passion for life, and everything that you pursue. Really admire and respect you, and I'm super grateful to have met you, and I can't wait to see what lies ahead in your journey.
Thank you very much. And I will talk to you soon.